Good afternoon. It's February 13th, just after 1:30. This is the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. We have a number of items on our agenda today. The PROS plan from Park and Planning, an OLO report on transfer development rights and building lot termination programs in Montgomery County, and then a number of supplementals and amendments to the FY23 to 28 capital improvements program. I'm Andrew Friedson, chair of the committee. We have Natalie Fanny-Gonzalez here. Councilmember Giwando will be here momentarily. In the interest of letting our colleagues in the executive branch leave and not have to stay here for some of the other briefings and conversations that we have, we're going to start with items 3, 4, and 5 on the agenda. I don't think those will take particularly long, and then we'll allow the executive department representatives and Housing Opportunities Commission representatives to leave if they need to go on and do their work, and we will continue on with the rest of the agenda, two really important briefings that we're getting here today. So with that, why don't I turn to council staff, and we can take it from there on the 3 supplemental items here to the capital improvements program.
Thank you, Committee Chair. My name is Eunice Jung, Legislative Analyst. So for the upcoming fiscal year, there are 3 housing-related supplementals to the CIP. There's 2 from HOC and 1 for DHCA. I'm going to start with the 2 supplementals from HOC. The 6-year CIP now has a total recommendation of $12,375,000 from the executive. The FY24 appropriations total $1,250,000 in addition to the past cumulative appropriations of $11,125,000. The new appropriations include funding for 1 new project and 1 ongoing project, and both are funded through current revenue. The new project is Elizabeth House demolition. The total project cost is $3 million, with half the funding, or $1.5 million, from the county. HOC will contribute the rest of the remaining $1.5 million partially through DHC loans as well. This project operates on a relatively quick timeline. Demolition is scheduled for spring/summer of 2023. And the purpose of the project is for community members to have better access to the new South County Regional Recreation and Aquatic Center, which is expected to be substantially complete by April and open to the public this summer. Council staff recommends approving this as recommended by County Executive.
Great. Well, first of all, let me just say how excited I am about this project. It's a really great example of a co-location, of a public-private partnership, of the county government working together with the private sector and with Housing Opportunities Commission. It checks a lot of boxes. I have said before on this project, I will say again, it's a model for other parts of the county, and I think there's at least 1 Bethesda-based representative and 1 Wheaton-based representative here who would do a few here for that purpose. But I also wanted to note, as I had when we did the prior HOC conversation, this is only made possible because of Bruce Lee, who unfortunately recently passed away, and so I wanted to once again acknowledge that, once again extend all of our condolences to his family and to the Lee Development Group and to the Greater Silver Spring Chamber and all of those who he worked with. But this is really going to be an important part of his legacy, important part of the county's legacy, and something that I know we're all excited about. So I just wanted to make sure I acknowledge that. Any comments from HOC or from the executive branch on this project?
Well, first of all,
just hit your microphone.
Thank you so much for those introductory comments. Of course, we echo them. This is a project that we're extraordinarily proud about and look forward to celebrating in an upcoming naming celebration and ribbon cutting here in the spring and in the summer. And then generally, as it pertains to our overall budget, just wanted to express appreciation on behalf of our board, on behalf of our staff, and all of the community members that will benefit from the ongoing support that the funding provided by this council provides. And so with that, thank you.
Sounds good. Any comments from colleagues?
I would say that this is one of the projects I saw when I was on the planning board, the Elizabeth Square development, and it's so exciting to see it move forward. I'm just ready to vote.
Sounds good. Well, without objection, we'll approve this and move on to the next supplemental item.
Thank you.
All right, so the next at HOC supplemental is for an ongoing project, the WSSC sewer and stormline improvements at Elizabeth Square. This project was already approved by council in the past, but this year there is a recommended funding increase of $520,000 due to a revised bid estimate and some changes in the scope of the project. This supplements the prior cumulative appropriation of $705,000 for a total funding amount of $1.225 million for the 6-year CIP. So this project supports the goals of economic development and affordable housing initiatives. So council staff also recommends approving this as recommended by the executive.
Of course, this is directly related to the prior item that we approved without objection, and so unless there is objection from colleagues, the same comments and support here apply, and we're excited to see all the various entities. It demonstrates that the partnership that is needed, not just from county government and the private sector and Housing Opportunities Commission, but also from the utilities to move this forward. So without objection, we will approve that item as well. And I'll turn to my colleague, Councilmember Joanna.
Just wanted to say hello, and I also don't object to the first item. So thank you.
Sounds good. So unanimously, without objection, both items 3 and 4. Thank the Executive Branch Housing Opportunities Commission for joining us. We'll let you go for that. Those in the Executive Branch who are here for item 5 will take that up now. Thank you so much. I'll turn to council staff while our colleagues at the Executive Branch are joining us at the table. This is preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing. This was part of the additional appropriation that the council made at the request of the county executive, and this is essentially to reappropriate the funds that have been repaid through this program, and so we want to both talk through that, but also hear about the program itself. But I'll turn to council staff now.
Thank you, Committee Chair. I think you actually summarized the main points of this. It's pretty straightforward. It's additional appropriation of $30.2 million in loan repayment proceeds to support the NOAA fund, the Preservation of Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing Fund. As you mentioned, the $30.2 million will come from the loan repayment from the Scarborough Square project, which was originally purchased by DHCA through right of first refusal and then immediately sold to Rockville Housing Enterprise to continue to manage as preservation of affordable housing. So because this is straightforward, council staff also recommends approving this as recommended by the executive.
Well, we appreciate it. This is good and positive news. We have our first repayment. We now can redeploy these funds to another project. Just wanted to give an opportunity to the executive branch to explain this project and this particular fund, if you'd like, and any plans for the future for these funds for other rights of first refusal or any other activities that you foresee these resources going towards. And we have Mr. Bruton, our new deputy director. Just hit that button right there.
Sorry, I'm getting used to the buttons.
No problem. That's Miss Salem is here to help.
Thank you very much. I've been told recently that Pope and Salem is always right, so I'll follow her
Good advice.
directives on the buttons. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak in favor of this reappropriation of the loan that's returning from Scarborough. As the council determined when they approved the NOAA fund, I don't think it was last year, still getting up on my history, the county has a significant number, over 11,000 units of affordable housing that are at risk of losing affordability because of redevelopment possibilities. And this NOAA fund helps. It's another tool in our toolkit to provide the layers of funding we need to preserve existing affordable housing, as separate from providing funding for the creation of new affordable housing. And as with Scarborough, we have multiple projects that are existing affordable housing that are in the pipeline. One that we briefly touched on last week that is still in gestation, which could benefit from this, and some others in the pipeline. Pofin can talk, and Mary can talk more specifically about other projects, and we will definitely this time stick to projects that have closed or that we have written commitments to, though we can talk more about the process if you'd like. And I'll pass to Pofin if she'd like to talk about the uses that we've made so far of the NOAA funds and any future plans.
Sure. For the record, I'm Paul Salem, the finance chief with the DSCA. As we discussed last week, this is a great funding source that dedicated to housing preservation. And so as the partner report show, that we have a couple projects that already been closed, and Scarborough is one of the good projects that help us to preserve, I don't have that number on top of my head, supposed to know, like a 300-something units. And so the fund that coming back to the county, the department and the county executive, we diligently try to use the money to continue support the project I brought to DSCA. As you may be aware, we have working with a couple of the nonprofit partners, including HOC and some other community-based organizations, to look at the potential preservation project. And so a lot of them is going to happen next several months. And so this would be a good resources for us to continue to preserve the needed the housing, especially some of the along the transit corridor, and that's very important for county to work whatever we can to preserve those affordable units. Mary, do you have anything to add?
I certainly agree with my colleagues, and I just want to reemphasize that this is a very important program for us. We are proactively attempting to save some of the affordable housing that would be most at risk. And the naturally occurring affordable housing, particularly along the transit lines, are the ones that are most at risk. And so by having this funding, we can actually target and focus in on those particular areas. Many of those housing units are smaller units in many cases, and they're older units as well. So we are grateful for your support, and we look forward to it. Thank
Appreciate that. Just a couple things to note. One, right of first refusal. We talked about it before. I think it's important for those who are tuning in. When a multifamily unit is being sold, the county government and/or the Housing Opportunities Commission, as the public housing authority, has the opportunity to step in to buy it, the right to refuse purchasing it, the right of first refusal. And this fund has allowed, in this particular instance, with a significant commitment for a temporary period of time, to step in to exercise that right and then turn it over to a nonprofit developer, who then is able to get permanent financing, and in the permanent financing is able to pay back the county for the expenditure, in this case $30.2 million. So appreciate the fact that it is working as it was intended. I think that's really positive. I will note that the reason why rights of first refusal work is that we built housing in the first place. There's agreement here on this committee and on this council. Part of a healthy housing environment is that we have to build housing, and this is one of the tools in that toolkit that's predicated on that idea, and I think it's a real positive. I'm sure there's other opportunities to do it. We went into a lot of detail previously on this fund and some other funds and how they interrelate. I look forward to coming back, not at this time, and talking through what tools are used in what circumstances and how we're leveraging and following through on some of the commitments that have been made. But this is a positive, and not only do we want to approve this appropriation, I wanted to give an opportunity to you and DHCA to explain how this is working and to show that this is one of the positive tools in the toolkit to be used that we need, in addition to lots of others that we will go into more detail as we started to last week. So with that, if colleagues don't have, Councilmember Jawando has a few comments, and then we'll vote after that.
Very quickly, not even a few. Happy to hear this. We always talk about the 3 P's: produce, preserve, and protect. And we've been talking about those in our first 2 sessions here, about how we do that for all of our residents. So this is a good news. So happy to move forward. Thank you.
Sounds good, and there's fervent agreement, so we'll stop at that. And unless there's any objection, we'll approve this 3-0. And appreciate you joining us, and look forward to coming back to talk about this and some of the other tools that we have and how they're working, and how we need to move them forward in order to address the housing challenges that we clearly face. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And with that, thank you. your job here is done. That's good. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda here. We'll call up both council staff as well as the Parks Department. I believe we have Director Mike Riley, Deputy Director Mitty Figueredo, and I think that might be it from the Parks Department who are joining us. Darren Fluchet also joining us up here as well. Sorry, Darren, I didn't see you at first. And with that, we are going to be doing an update here on the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space plan. Colleagues have a version of this, and I know that those who are in the audience and who are watching at home, the millions watching from home, should be able to see the slideshow that is showing up. So with that, I'll briefly turn to Ms. Dunn on council staff to add any context that I've missed, and then we can turn it over to the Parks Department to go through this plan, which is exciting. Parks, recreation, and open space are things that everybody wants, and we need more of, and we want more of. And so this is talking about not just what we have, but what we want, and not just what we're currently doing there, but what we can do in order to better take advantage, leverage, and activate the spaces and places that we have in the county that really bring people together. And we know during the pandemic, in particular, how important these places and spaces are for people, not just as luxuries, but as a core part of quality of life, of mental health, of physical health, and wellness. So with that, Ms. Dunn.
Good afternoon, committee, and thank you. Well, the chair definitely put everything, and I don't want to take away from the parks time. I'll just say that I'm thrilled they're here. I'm thrilled that you guys are receiving this briefing today. I think the plan's amazing. I think you'll see through the slide presentation that there's a lot to be excited about, and there's a lot new. And so with that, I don't want to steal their time. I'm going to turn it straight over to them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. This is my first audience in front of you. I promise I will never say Fed again. It's the last time I've appeared in front of you for many decades, and I'm trying to erase that term out of my head. I'll just make some brief opening remarks. I think this is a pretty rock-solid plan for the future of our park system. A lot of thought went into it. You will hear from Darren. I think a lot of the themes will not be surprising to you. I have the pleasure of being able to talk to you about our work programs every 6 months, and some of the themes you're going to hear about today, including physical activity for our community members, social engagement and interaction, providing adequate parkland and programs in our population centers, protecting our environment, and promoting racial equity and social justice have been themes of my presentations, particularly meeting the challenges of our growing population in Montgomery County. When I started working in parks, it was mostly about large tracts of land subdividing and providing parks in suburban communities. I thought that was very challenging. Now the real challenge lies into how we're going to have walkable, vibrant parks adjacent to our population centers, and we're working very hard on that, and I think we're ahead of the curve. Another reason this is the best PROS plan we've ever done is it was informed by Thrive. We, of course, were paying close attention to all the community engagement and input from stakeholders on Thrive as we developed this plan. And the last thing I just want to say is we're pretty proud of our community engagement efforts. We really tried harder than ever through mechanisms like intercept surveys, multilingual radio and bus ads, door knocking in apartment buildings, focus groups based on certain demographics, statistically valid surveys, bilingual videos, and there's more you'll hear about. But I really do believe we heard from a broad segment of our community as towards what they want to see in the future of our parks, and I think the plan reflects that input. And with that, I'll turn it over to Darren Fluchet, Chief of our Park Planning and Stewardship Division, to run you through some slides.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mike. Again, my name is Darren Fluchet, Division Chief of Park Planning and Stewardship, and really happy to be with you this afternoon to talk about this plan. So what is the PROS plan? The PROS plan is the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, and it is the Montgomery County version of the Land Preservation, Parks, and Recreation Plan, the easy to say LPPRP. And what that does is submitting that qualifies us for grants from the Department of Natural Resources, specifically the program Open Space grant. This is a really important funding source that can be used towards land acquisition for conservation and park purposes, as well as the development of park and recreation facilities. So it's an important funding source for us. But we also use the plan as an opportunity for us to do some forward thinking about the direction of the Parks Department. What are our goals and objectives for the next 5 years? We have to do these every 5 years. So we ask the question, what do we have? How is it being used? And what do we need? And are the parks located in places where people can access them? How can we improve access to our parks? And what are our conservation and stewardship activities and goals? So this really becomes the primary policy document for the Parks Department. And just as it is a framework for all of our other plans and activities, its framework is Thrive. So we look to Thrive for setting the broad direction we're going as a Parks Department. Thrive, of course, has a Parks chapter, and that Parks chapter identifies some key themes and objectives, and I think you'll see those reflected in the framework of PROS as well. So speaking of Thrive, we were able to take advantage of a lot of the outreach that was conducted during the Thrive process. So we participated in dozens of presentations, one-on-one interviews, events, and used a variety of tools to get feedback on, how could you be powered by parks? It was sort of our framing question. But as Mike mentioned, we also deployed a randomized survey to residents to get a true cross-section of the population, not just folks in our parks, although we did do intercept surveys, not just folks that are on our mailing lists and go online and respond to surveys, although we did that as well. But the survey allowed us to get to folks that really were just minding their own business, and one day they went to the mail and they saw a survey from us. Not park super users, but a true cross-section of the population. And that information gave us a lot of insight into how folks are currently using our parks and how they would and want to. So I'm not going to go into significant detail into the plan right now. I'm just going to give kind of an overview of what's in it and encourage you all to dive into the report, which is on our website. But we have an introductory chapter, and then we have individual chapters on physical activity, social connectivity, environmental stewardship, and land conservation and management, which is the agriculture chapter. Each of those middle chapters has an introduction, kind of sets the scene, an inventory of our programs, discussion of our own assessment of how we're doing, and then recommendations and precedent, other examples of what other folks are doing across the country. And then we have an implementation chapter. So diving in. So we asked ourselves, what is the purpose of parks? Why are we here? What do we think parks do? What do they accomplish? And our answer to that question, as supported by Thrive, is three things. The primary purpose of parks is to encourage physical activity, provide social connectivity, and conduct environmental stewardship. So we said those are the three legs of the stools of what we view the purpose of parks. You'll see there listed a number of themes that come up repeatedly in the report, and I'll cover some of that moving forward. In that survey, we asked folks a really key question, which is, what makes a good place to live? What impacts the quality of life? What are the factors that make a community a great place? And you'll see that Parks, Trails, and Recreation was right up there as a top 3 factor, along with crime and safe communities, high-quality public schools. So, we, as Councilmember Friedson mentioned during the pandemic, this is reinforced, I think, by what we heard, which was what an incredible role parks play in our quality of life and how essential that is. This is a slide I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. There's a lot of information. You don't have to read those tables. But they say something really interesting. We asked in our survey, we listed a number of categories of service, things that that we do in the Parks Department, and we asked 2 questions related to that. One is, which of these factors are most important, and which are we doing well at, and where do we have room for improvement? And then we basically drew 2 circles with the answers to those questions, and we looked at the overlap of those things. What are the things that are important, but there's more room for improvement? So if something was important, but we're doing great, we didn't put it on the list. If something is not important and we're doing so-so, we didn't put it on the list. We focused on important plus room for improvement. And we said, this is where we need to focus over the next 5 years. And those things were access to restrooms, maintenance and physical condition of our parks. We have 422 of them. A feeling of safety when you're in our public spaces, and the variety and selection of our programs and activities. And then we did the same thing with a series of statements, like things like, we need more park and recreation options that are suitable for seniors. And we had a series of statements like that, and we said, what's important and what are we doing well? And the 3 things that we need to be focused more on are opportunities and recreational options for seniors. The park system should focus more on preserving nature and the environment. And we need more recreational opportunities that appeal to teens. So you will see those things kind of come up a lot in the plan. We also looked at the demographics of our community, and they are changing. So in 1990, 72% of the residents in the county were white. In 2010, that was half of the population, and now it is 40% of the population. So we are a diversifying county with distinctly changing characteristics. And you can see the projections on the right. That just is projected to continue. But it's not just race and ethnicity, it's also other demographic factors like age. So that chart on the left, the blue columns are the past, 2010 and 2019, you can call it 2020. And then the orange bars are projections into the future. But you can see over the past decade, the only age group that has increased as a share of the population is the over 65 population. So we have a community that's getting older. And then on the right, you see some characteristics of our household makeup. In 1960, 60% of households were married couples with children under 18 living at home. Today, that's 25%. Also today, 25% of the population live with non-family members. So these are people with roommates or people who live alone. So as a Parks Department, what does that say about our challenge, which is we're not just, we've been building playgrounds for 60 years, and we've done a really good job, and we're not going to stop. But what are the other things we need to do to make sure that we're supporting folks who are young adults or seniors and are also in need of public space and public amenities? Then the next factor we consider when we're thinking about our park system is land use context. So I sometimes talk about we're really managing 3 park systems. It's a very different challenge to manage urban parks than it is suburban parks, and they're pretty distinct from our rural park context. Those are really sort of very sort of distinct park types, and we have to think about those things in distinct ways. So it may well be that ultimately we're providing the same services in land use A, B, and C, maybe soccer, dog parks, playgrounds, trails, and environmental stewardship. But the way those things look and the way we deploy those amenities is going to be distinct based on the land use context. So in a rural area, it may be a wide open field. In a suburban area, you might play soccer in soccerplex. And in an urban area, you might be on a soccer court, right? So we need to be thinking about how land use influences our amenity delivery. So that was all chapter 1. I will not spend as much time on all the chapters, but we end each chapter with a series of recommendations, which I will not read, but these are the high-level lines of them. And moving on to chapter 2 is about physical activity. So we know a core purpose of our parks is to give people opportunity to get exercise. Yes, sir.
Can we just take a quick break? I'm going to turn to Councilmember Jawanda, who has a question, and then maybe the end of each chapter, I don't want to go through each slide, ask questions, but maybe at the end of each chapter, if colleagues have some questions, then at the end we'll ask some overarching questions if that's okay with everybody. So, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Yep, you're reading my mind. Just, could you just, I might have missed this, but the sample size, who did you talk to again, and how many people, and could you just say that?
Yeah, so we had a variety of different survey tools, and depending on the question we're asking, we were able to look at the combination or one of those tools. But for the randomized survey, which I think is what you're asking about,
Well, whatever the results you presented in the first couple of slides. Yeah.
So that was I have the number. It was less than 900, but it was in the 800s, and we think that's enough to get us kind of a scientific sample. And because of the randomized nature.
Are they who were the population?
No, these are county residents.
You contracted with someone who does polling.
Correct.
And they did a sample of county residents.
Correct.
I think that's important because who are you talking to, and the answer you get is different. You know?
It is different, and this is one of, I'll just tell you, a series of opportunities for us to really examine that question, because we did do the online open town hall as well, same survey, different answer set.
Oh, absolutely.
And then we did one where we went into the parks and we just talked to park users and we said, fill out this survey. It was shorter. Right. Different answers. And we've been working a lot in the Long Branch community doing the same thing. Knocking on doors gets us, in multifamily apartment buildings, gets us a different set of answers than the online survey or the people that attend park events. And so it's kind of triangulating all those things and getting the most complete picture we can.
Well, I appreciate that. And better than triangulating is having an equity-based approach, because we know certain people, the squeaky wheel does get the oil. And it matters. You want to hear from the squeaky wheel, but you also want to hear from the person who doesn't know the service is even available. And so I'm really happy to hear that you just did a broad sample. I think there might be ways to even refine that even more through the door knocking and other, just by going to people who actually have no connectivity to parks, right? That, I used to talk about this with libraries all the time, that, we have so many things. You can do Rosetta Stone for free, you can learn at the libraries, but many people don't know what's available. And so glad to hear that. I think the more that we can do to dig into all the communities and then kind of overlay that and see how we need to respond, that's good to know.
Say something very quickly. Let me just give you, I know it's so hard for people to understand that the Parks Department is actually doing this, same thing with the Planning Department. When I was on the Planning Board and we worked on the Wheaton Regional Park Master Plan update, I was with the Parks Department walking the H Mart right outside the Wheaton Regional Park and talking to people, what kind of things would you love to see at Wheaton Regional Park. Definitely the same, in the same vein that you are referring to. Obviously, we always want more outreach, but I'm very proud to say that these guys have evolved on this area and always towards the right direction. So that's it.
Yep. And that, not a question, just a comment, but I did ask a question and you answered it, and I'm happy with it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's an important point, and I was going to allow you to explain the intercept versus the survey, and I think you just did. The intercept are actually flagging down somebody who's in the parks using the services, whereas the survey was a randomized sampling of county residents. Both perspectives are important. I do think we need to have a level of intentionality, both to know, what do people want to see who have used the services and know what's there and what's not there and what's working and what's not working, to give us some eyes on the ground. But we also really need to hear from the folks who aren't there, figuring out why aren't they there. Did they not know about it? Do they feel like the services are not benefiting them or not there to support them, or do not serve their needs? And I think that's always going to be a dynamic that we're going to have to be really intentional about, and it's hard. That is not an easy approach. It's easy to ask the people who show up what they think. It's hard to reach the people who aren't there and find out why they're not there and to figure out what changes need to be made. And I appreciate that there's a level of interest in working through that.
And I'll just say candidly, since we are deep in the Long Branch plan right now, where we did door knocking, it can be sobering to read the comments from folks that we had to go to and knock on their door when they're in their PJs, and they say, they will give us feedback that we were not used to hearing about their perceptions of our parks, and it's important. and you know, it's part of making our park system better is hearing not only from the folks that are doing yoga in the park and having a great time and feel really empowered and excited about our parks and plugged in, but folks that that don't feel that way. And then, but to answer, just to make one point of clarification, the charts that I showed were the randomized survey, not the combined. Depending on the question we're asking ourselves, we'll look at different combinations of survey responses.
Appreciate that. I think that's all the questions we have on this chapter. Let's move on to the next chapter.
So, thank you. So the next chapter is about physical activity. How do we provide opportunities for people to get exercise and get those endorphins flowing in our parks? So we looked at what is our inventory of facilities for physical activity. And then we sort of scrutinized that as well as the survey data and kind of assess where we are to then develop recommendations. The chart there is a question of how well are we doing at providing the amenities that people are asking for. So the way to read this chart is the two blues are adequate or partly met, and then the red is there's not enough. So you can kind of read from the bottom: dog parks, ice skating rinks, public gardens, museums, and skateboard parks, to name a few, were the things that we need to be thinking about providing more for. And then our assessment was basically we need to continue to provide more physical activity opportunities in urban areas, provide safe access to our parks, serve our community, basically based on equity goals, senior citizens and teenagers, and then provide adequate facilities for physical activity broadly, including athletic fields and trails. We just another illustrative table that's helpful. We asked people to identify from a list their top 3 choices, their first choice, their second choice, and third. And you can see this is pretty consistent across PROS surveys in the past. Natural surface trails and paved trails, you can see them there in the top 3, pretty consistently. Popular amenities, and then natural areas and wildlife habitat. Again, really supporting that aspect of our mission as well. So we had a number of recommendations that support physical activity and can kind of lead us, point us in a direction. And you know, you may be seeing disc golf coming up in the future, or additional skate parks and volleyball are some of the specific amenities that came up. So the other thing we did was we had a consultant and we asked them, hey, you know, physical activity is really important. What are other communities doing to advance physical activity in their parks and recreation systems? And so we provide little snapshots of innovative and interesting programs to kind of inspire us. We also added 1 or 2 of our own programs on the list too. You'll see the Tales on Trails program. But so that was just a piece, just constant learning. So the third, should I pause? Okay. Yeah.
So just 2 quick questions. One, quantitative versus qualitative. When people say it's adequate, do they mean it's adequate like the maintenance is good, or are they saying it's adequate like there's enough of them in my community that I have access to? Was that open-ended, or do you have a sense of what that response was?
The way we asked it is, are your needs met?
Got it. So
that could be.
So it was both. Yes, and or whatever they perceived to be. Okay, and obviously in survey results, that's a question. You know, we deal with this all the time. Of, you know,
what
one person's response is potentially different to another's based on their own perception. That perception is their reality, so that's important for us to know. Second piece, can you just speak quickly, because I found it to be striking, the making space for girls as part of your, you know, the takeaway here about focusing on teens in particular. Could you just talk a little bit about that? It was included in here, and I've seen it in the report, but I just thought it was an interesting point. I'd love for you to expound upon a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things that we are learning, and by we I mean the Parks Department, but also sort of the broader, you know, set of folks that are interested in public spaces, right, healthy public spaces, is that it can be a little bit easy to talk about teenagers as if that's sort of one thing, and the answer to our teenage activities is always skate parks, or something like that, right? But that's obviously more complex than that. And even when you're designing a skate park, you need to design that skate park in such a way that's going to be safe and welcoming for everybody, not just the sort of the hardcore skaters who can be really intimidating for other folks. So design comes into it, location of the amenity comes into it, and then the variety of the amenities that we're providing for teenagers comes into it. And there's a lot of work being done right now on what is it that teenage girls want out of a public space, and that might be different than what teenage boys want. And so one of the things is opportunities to talk and interact with each other. So swing sets that are facing each other, exercise bikes that are facing each other, things like that, and creating that sort of social welcoming space in addition to, that was a chapter on physical activity. So in addition to sort of getting sweaty, are there non-competitive ways to get people moving? Sort of casual roller skating, that like as opposed to, sort of a racetrack kind of context. So there's lots of things that we're thinking about. We're constantly learning what the desires are, talking to people and trying to get smarter about
And like
that.
for some teens, like for older adults, not everybody's physical activity is created equally. Like for some people, just getting to the park and being in the park is a physical activity. For others, playing a competitive sport inside a park or a game inside a park that's much more exertive is a physical activity. So having that range of options for multiple people. I appreciate you saying that. Not everybody can use a skate park, right? Not everybody has that ability, and so having that opportunity.
I would just say that about 2 years ago, I sent you the article about girls wanting swing sets, and that came out of that. This is not new, but it's new to you guys. But there was an application with the planning department. I think it was in Germantown, and I asked the developer to put the swing sets for girls inspired on this, and I had to say, Domino's tables. We need to bring more of those, because especially talking about the senior population and those who are Latinos, just the fact that we have a table that is solid, it creates engagement, and it's so cheap to do, and it's very successful in many places around the nation, including Florida and Texas. Felt like I needed to share that. That's
And let the record reflect that everything that you said that a teenage girl might want, I also would want. So I just want to note that, like, having swings that are facing each other, where you could be outside and have a conversation that's a little bit more active than sitting on a couch, sounds terrific to me. So we categorize these things in certain areas, and I think it's important to focus that they would serve certain communities, but what's good for older adults or what's good for teenage girls or what's good for different populations aren't exclusively good for that group. So I just wanted to note that.
Right, I've been slapped on the wrist for don't just talk about skateboard park. 30-year-olds like to skate too. 40-year-olds like to skate too.
And plenty of teenage
men
girls
like
like
to
to
sit on
skate,
benches.
yeah.
Like
Right,
it's some of the we sort of sometimes get into a trap about stereotyping amenities for a particular group, and the answer is it's like universal design. A lot of these things are good for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for saying that. I think that's all the questions we have on this chapter. Let's move on to the next chapter.
Perfect. So the next chapter it can be a little bit heady, right? It's parks are for social connectivity. What does it mean to provide social connectivity? What does it mean to provide opportunities to build social capital in our communities? And what we really mean is our parks are the public square, the literal public square. They're the place where you can come and sit and see strangers and or meet friends or learn about the history of your community. So we see our parks as serving a really important social purpose. You can see folks sitting around a fire pit in the evening or listening to a historical reenactment in our Josiah Henson Park, just to give a couple of examples. So we looked at what are all the things that we're doing in our park system and in our county to foster social connectivity. Our nature center is obviously really important. Developing civic greens, having volunteer programs, a wide variety of things. And to your point about sort of low barrier to entry activities, one of the things that we wanted to do is provide more spaces for impromptu activity. Not everything is, I'm going to have a park permit and then I'm going to go to this programmed sports activity. I should be able to show up to my parks and use them in a variety of flexible ways. We want to provide support services and amenities for a variety of things. Create culturally appropriate public spaces, places that reflect the demographic diversity, are welcoming to the full spectrum of demographic diversity in our county. And then, do things with a great deal of flexibility, pop-up spaces, pilot programs, try things. And really go back to that point that we heard about feeling of safety. That's one of the things. Our parks need to be safe in terms of crime, but also safe in terms of a feeling of welcomeness. So we have a variety of recommendations. I'll just tell you, some of the things are going to take time to unpack. It's not that this plan says, do this, and the next day we're going to be able to wave a magic wand, but we're going to tackle these things over time. And again, we looked at both programs and events and physical spaces that will foster that kind of social connectivity. And you can review the plan for more details.
Yeah, I think this just speaks to what we were talking about earlier, about what we saw during the pandemic and how necessary these public spaces are. And I think as we talk about the trends that we have previously in the demographic dynamics that we have looked at, 37% of people reporting that they work from home. Again, it's a survey. We don't know if that's one day a week, a half a day a week, all day, every day. We don't know what that means, but these spaces are going to be even more important because the ability to socially interact with others, or people who are doing that at work or with other activities, are being limited. As these positives about digital opportunities present themselves, they also have negative drawbacks, because it allows you to sit behind a screen to engage in certain ways that you would otherwise have done. Being able to get stuff delivered means you don't have to go to the store. You don't see people. So I think that speaks to the focus that you have, which I think is going to be even more important as we move forward because of all of the changes that are happening in society. So thanks. Let's go to the next chapter.
Great. So environmental stewardship. This is a critical and core one for us. Also, incidentally, on the survey, so for our residents as well. And so we did an inventory of what are all the resources that we have in our parks, in our county. And we identified, the need to, recommit to natural resource stewardship as an important aspect of what we do in our parks. That can help drive our acquisitions. We also need to have a climate resilient park system and provide appropriate access to natural areas. Getting out into our parks is something that we know is meaningful and important to our residents in terms of their quality of life. We need to make sure we're doing that in a way that's consistent with our stewardship goals as well, and that we have a strategy and we strategically deploy it in a way that we can measure and explain to folks. If your basement is flooding less than it used to, it may well be because of some of the stormwater management practices that we've implemented in our parks, and try to draw the line between outcomes and our activities. So we have a variety of recommendations for that as well, and I guess I'll pause again for folks. We also, I don't know if people know about the urban wood sale we have out in Green Farm every year, where people can buy wood from trees that have fallen in our parks, but we have a variety of programs that we looked at that help connect people to the environment.
What was the, I remember a while back we had that conversation about the weed warriors, and that you wanted to expand that with other things that this community could do. Is that part of this?
Yeah, so I think the Weed Warrior program is a really good example of, both the social connectivity, because we've had more volunteers than ever. We have some really fantastic staff running that program, and they've got more volunteers than ever trained up on we don't really invite people to take things out of our parks lightly, so we have to train them on what exactly are the invasive species. So for folks that don't know the Weed Warrior program, that's a program where volunteers remove non-native invasive species from our parks. It requires a lot of training, and we have some incredibly devoted volunteers that do that, and that program is growing. And we're also always, all of our volunteer programs are growing right now, whether that's litter cleanup in our stream valleys or our trail maintenance efforts. So volunteers are really powering a lot of what's going on in our parks. Does that answer your question?
But I thought was that we wanted to use the same volunteers for other things, not just the invasive species cleanup. Did I make?
So I'll have the pleasure in early March of giving the semi-annual report. I do have a slide on volunteer participation in programs. We tend to group them into weed warriors and different groups like historic and cultural volunteers, park police volunteers. Brookside Gardens has an army of volunteers that work there. So I'm going to give some statistical data on the numbers and the different groups that support our parks.
As someone who has participated in some of the weed warrior activities as well as some of the natural surface trail activities, I can assure anybody who's watching this that it requires no level of skill in order to volunteer and participate in these activities. All are welcome, as evidenced by the fact that even I have been able to participate in some way. But it's a great program. I think it's a wonderful way for residents to feel engaged and to be part of their local park or parks across the county. And I hear from so many people how much they enjoy the volunteering that they do. They feel really connected and a part of it. So anything that we can do to support those programs, to get more people involved in them. I do think that it's an example of not everybody even knows that there are those opportunities. So we can help you in that sense of engaging more people, I think, in that effort. But it's a really important part of what we do. And I think the important aspect of the Parks Department, much of the original land that the Parks Department gets and still continues to get comes from dedications that are related to environmental sensitivities. You know, land that's not developable, or, shouldn't be developed, can't be developed because of environmental challenges. And so the Parks Department becomes the caretaker of these sensitive areas and stream beds and otherwise. And so I think important that this remains part of the goals and objectives of the Parks Department. We want to acquire new property. We want to have urban parks. We want to have parks in all kinds of different areas of the county. But ultimately, the department essentially started by getting land that was in sensitive areas and continues to get dedicated land in sensitive areas that it becomes the caretaker for, and we don't want to lose sight of that being part of the objective to have as the Parks Department moving forward. So thank you for that. Unless there's any other questions or comments, let's move on to the next chapter.
Okay. One of the requirements of the submission is to have a discussion of agriculture and land conservation in the county. We obviously have the Ag Reserve, which makes talking about this fairly easy. And so we did an inventory of acreage of different programs that we have towards land conservation, and kind of developing a little bit of a strategy for moving forward along those lines, and a fairly succinct set of recommendations for this chapter.
I'll just note we're going to have an important conversation of an OLO report after this conversation, specifically related to some of the key tools we have in the county for why we have been as successful as we have been in land preservation, particularly related to farming and agriculture, and how we have avoided the sprawl development that has largely been a challenge in most other suburban jurisdictions around the country in this close proximity to an urban setting. So I hope that we'll continue to think through ways that we need to be creative to refine these tools that we have, because we can see the benefits of doing it right and what it means to the county, what it means to our overall environmental sustainability goals, and advancing the goals of smart growth development, which we didn't even know it was called that when the county employed this, long before any of the three of us served here, much less were alive. But that we now take over as caretakers of that, like you are taking over the property that has been dedicated to the Parks Department. We're taking over the policies that have led to the preservation of land and the avoidance of sprawl development. So appreciate that being noted. So Chapter 6, implementation.
Implementation. So how does the rubber meet the road in all this? The chapter sort of addresses the capital improvement, the CIP process, setting acquisition priorities, and then using a set of tools to help us with those priorities. So energizing public spaces, essentially our urban parks guidance, our equity focus areas from the planning department, and then what we also look at. Not only is a park in an equity focus area, but can residents of an equity focus area access that park with a short walk? So we make sure that we're really understanding which of our parks are serving our equity areas. Developing a level of service analysis, which I'll talk about in a moment when I talk about the appendix, which is almost as exciting as the main body of the report. And then a discussion of our public engagement, which is, how do we equitably work with the community to understand the full picture of what people want and need.
And I don't mean to interrupt because we're going to take questions at the end, but can you explain for us and for those watching how the Commission has looked at equity focused areas that it might be slightly different but very similar to equity emphasis areas that Council of Governments has looked at, just so we understand, are they the same, are they slightly different, what makes them different?
So I will do my best.
Okay.
And then I think there might be folks.
If not, we can follow up on
Right.
that, but I just think it's important as we
Yeah.
talk about it.
Because this is a designation that we borrow from our partners in the planning department, the equity focus area designation, which looks at racial characteristics, income characteristics, and speaks English less than well. I think is the way it's phrased in the thing. So non-English speakers and where those three.
I shouldn't have asked you to explain something that isn't yours. We have Jason Sartor here, but we don't need to do it right now because I don't think it's directly impacting this report because it's a similar idea and intention and goal. But I think it would be helpful at some point to come back, and it could be in writing, but maybe we can just get both the difference of the COG equity emphasis areas that the council has oftentimes used versus the planning department's equity focus areas, and then, if possible, a map overlay that just shows any differences, that we will see, how we define each and what the differences are, because I think they overwhelmingly overlap, but not exclusively, perhaps. So it'd just be helpful to see that, but we don't need to get bogged down in it now. So let's continue, and I appreciate us following up on that.
Great, thank you. For the other chapters, we talked about precedents from elsewhere in the country. The one that we really zeroed in on for the implementation chapter is trying to adopt a more iterative process where we identify a need, we try something, we study it, and then we refine it, and then try again. And that's kind of a continuous cycle. So that's something that it's kind of an ethos we've tried to adopt in the Parks Department. So, kind of reaching the end here, we had, in addition to the plan itself, we have a detailed appendices which dives more into the level of service, identifying where each facility type, where we can compare that to a per capita target and see where we're providing what we would consider a satisfactory amount and where we're under providing. So I'll let you dive into that in the plan. The kind of the spoiler, we have a lot of needs of a growing population, and we looked at that in different land use contexts as well. So with that, I'll see if there's any additional questions.
Thank you. There's a lot here. There's a lot of really positives of what we're doing, a lot of opportunities and challenges perhaps before us of what we can do, what we've set the foundation to put ourselves in a position to do. It comes with a lot of commitment and a lot of time and a lot of resources that we're going to need in order to realize some of these, which I want to get to in a minute. But before I get into that, I'll turn it over to colleagues. I'll start with Councilmember Jwanda.
Thank you. I agree. Yeah, it's good to get the update and appreciate the hard copy too. And I can't help but pointing out you can also become a pro if you go to our parks and practice whatever you want to be a pro in. No, but it's really heartening to see how much you're doing. I wanted to ask about food, to the extent that that came up and I haven't read through the whole thing yet. I know I saw something about, I did see, because I was looking for it, park benches and tables. That's always a need, right? I've been in the sweepstakes at Wheaton Regional when you go, someone wants to reserve a table for the birthday party or whatever, and you got to get out there and camp out a little bit. Did food come up at all as on any of your various things? And then on a related question around food trucks and the current ability to do that. Look to expand it. Just could you address those issues?
Absolutely. Yes, they came up, and I think the plan is generally very supportive of providing opportunities for vendors to come and provide food. So we do talk about food trucks specifically. I'll also note in the Wheaton Regional Park Master Plan, we recommend installing power for food trucks, so they don't have to be running their engines the whole time that they're there. So that is very much the kind of thing that we heard and we are moving towards, and trying to make it easier for folks to come in and provide food opportunities.
Good. So if we have folks have ideas or thoughts, we want to do that. That's good. That's what I wanted to hear you say, and I thought that was the case. But good. Okay. That was my only question.
Appreciate it. I'll turn to your former colleague here, our current colleague.
I have nothing to say but love. Thank you for all this. Maybe you can go over how this is helpful for every time we have an application in the planning department, how developers can use this to move us forward, because sometimes people think that it's all about the government creating all these spaces, but it's more than that. We need the private sector to get involved. And every time we have the planning board has an application coming in, they coordinate with the parks department to see what the needs are in that particular community. So maybe for those who are watching this who don't know, that will be helpful. The millions of people watching this, very briefly.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So that's actually perfect opportunity for me to mention that we work closely with our colleagues in the planning department as development applications come in, and this is exactly one of the things that we talk about, because there's a variety of ways to meet your public amenity requirements, and sometimes we want to nudge folks towards thinking outside of park benches are really important, but just that plaza space may be cost effective for folks, but it may not meet all of our parks and open space goals in the county. So urging people to think about ways that they can achieve kind of the other goals that we have in the park system that are articulated in prose.
If I could, I just can't miss the opportunity to add that the Parks Department has a unique seat at the front of the table because of the nature of the organization that it may not have in other more traditional government structures. And as Chair Friedson said, a lot of our land over the decades has come in dedication. And more increasingly, a lot of our amenities are coming in dedication. We're actually requiring the delivery of complete furnished parks, in particular up in some area of Clarksburg, where the development paid for the entire amenities. So we are allowed and committed voice at the front end of the process that produces the results at the back end.
Appreciate that point, and there's some references here to the POPs, the privately owned public spaces, which needs to be something that we've looked into. I know the Parks Department has looked into that and continues to look into that, and that is definitely a part of those conversations, not just a sugary cereal or a type of orchestra. I always see POPs and I think of other things, and I've started to train myself of what it means, but I think it's important. Related to that, I think it's important, every master plan that we do here, we list all kinds of really exciting amenities, many of which are parks amenities and related open space amenities, some of which come to fruition, some of which don't. And I am wondering, what, if any, analyses that we have done to look at all of the different master planned potential parks and open space commitments that we have made. What of those are potentially private? What of those are public? Some of which are indeterminate. They could be either. Whether or not we discuss that publicly, I think it is important as a level setting because when we go through the master plan process, I think these are commitments that feel like the community is buying into a plan. That plan includes certain amenities because of all the reasons we saw here of how positive parks are and how important a role they play in people's lives, how generally positive people are about the department and the parks that we have. They want more of them, or they want them at all if they don't feel like they have them in their particular neighborhood. So I just want to get your sense of that, of how we look at that, how we view that, how we can have proactive and ongoing dialogue with communities about what is happening, whether it's happening, how likely it is to happen, and when.
So I think we'll get back to you on that one. We've done this exercise. We have poured through all the master plans to look to see the status of implementation related to parks, but I think it's a little stale. I think it's many years old. I do believe that's a very meaningful exercise, and we'll come back to you with the degree we can deliver something that really would be informative.
I think that'd be very much appreciated, not just by our committee, but by the community. And I think that ongoing conversation, I think, would be helpful to the department to level set expectations of what's likely to happen and when, what's needed for certain things to happen. Not everything is in your control. In fact, much of it is not in your control related to master plans. And so I do think that would be helpful. Pages 74 and 75, I know, have reference to some of the capital needs and how you prioritize those capital needs, but I think a bit of a deeper dive in what you were saying, maybe refreshing some of the prior efforts that have taken place. I think it's a good opportunity to do that now with a new council, with a lot new people. And I think it's also a great opportunity to do it just to make sure that that's up to date for the public so that we can have that conversation, because I think ultimately that will help you, because I think people will realize the level of financial commitment that would be necessary for some of these issues, and also some of the private sector needs that have to move forward in order for some of these things to take place. And I just think it would be helpful if that was part of the conversation.
I agree completely, and one focus area for the Parks Department over the last decade, plus or minus, has been to try to reduce the amount of time from master plan recommendation to on-the-ground implementation. And we've got some success stories, and that's in part, I think, to doing reality checks at the time of the master plan of what's feasible economically, what really could be delivered, and not make promises that are unlikely to happen, and two, just a commitment to move very quickly from the adoption of the plan into implementation, whether it's acquisition through the development process or coming to you to seek the budgetary means to move forward. It's really something that has value in so many ways. I've worked on projects where we've gone to implementation and the community has said, you didn't come out and consult with the community, and the truth is we consulted with the community that lived here before you did. And that's one of the big problems with 20 to 30 years between master plan and implementation.
Appreciate that point. And related to that, because I think it's directly tied to this, could you just talk a little bit about your approach to community engagement, how you gauge stakeholder input, how you discuss siting of new parks or changing of new activations or acquisitions, and also I think specifically related to that, how you balance the need to address local needs and broader, regional or county-wide needs. You're a county parks department. You are having, in your portfolio, county assets, and how do you balance the need of a local community and what they would like to see with their neighborhood park versus what the regional needs of that part of the county or the county as a whole are needed. And by the way, we face these same dynamics with libraries, as was noted previously, and other amenities. As a recreation center, which is a county recreation center, or a library, it's a county library, it's a county recreation center. It needs to serve those who are in proximity to it because it's the asset that's in their community, and it should, but it also needs to serve the broader community as well. Could you just talk a little bit about how you balance that and how you approach that?
Yeah, we actually have a slide we'd like to speak from for that.
Mitty Figueredo, for the record, Deputy Director of Parks Department. We thought about outreach a lot as we were drafting this plan, and we have language in here, and I urge you to go back and review it when you get a chance. Outreach is one tool we use out of a number of them to help us set priorities for the Parks Department. And a lot of people, when they hear outreach, they think in terms of just maybe a narrow type of public outreach, which is a community meeting. That's one kind of really important outreach tool that we use, but it's not the only one. Surveys, because we can make them more statistically valid than just a community meeting, are a very important tool. And we have a number that, and Darren can go into it a little bit more, that we've listed and described in the proposed plan.
Yeah, thank you. So we wrestle with this question all the time, and sometimes the answer is, trying to find a regional park or a rec park to put the amenity in, but then sometimes we know we need to use all of our assets, including local parks. But basically what we say in the pros plan is that we use a combination of methods, and you can kind of see them on the screen. So as Mitty was mentioning, public meetings are important. But so is the data collection and staff knowledge, market research. Where are the trends in recreation and parks? We had a good discussion about surveys and why they're so important for folks that don't come to your public meetings, don't fill out your online surveys. But we need to be going to people to get that comprehensive view of what the community is looking for. And then trying to get creative, show up in our parks, show up at other people's meetings, continuing that sort of ongoing engagement in ways that are something less than asking folks to leave their house at 6 p.m. to come to your meeting. And then also making sure that we're monitoring the data that we get from our customer service department. We've had really good experiences recently as park planners talking with our customer service folks and getting a really deep understanding of the kind of feedback they're getting from our parks in a very real-world kind of way. So taking all of that together and mixing it in the stew gives us a really good sense of how to strike that right balance.
Appreciate that. I think this is an ongoing conversation, of course, definitely a work in progress, as it will always be, but I think that broader conversation that we are all grappling with of how to balance the community needs of those who are most likely to use a particular amenity most versus the broader county needs of a county department and a county-wide asset is something that needs to be communicated and over-communicated and discussed over and over again. So figuring out ways to do that is important, and I think dealing with all of the other dynamics of making sure people can access it, making sure we're reaching the people who aren't showing up to find out why and what we need to do so that they show up, so that we have as diverse a community that is using these, both geographically, demographically, age, race, across the board. We want our parks to be for everyone. I know the Parks Department wants the parks to be for everyone, and certainly the efforts to do that will allow us to do this work better. So appreciate this. This is an exciting plan. I think the implementation of the plan will be where the key is, I think, as we all agree, but appreciate all of the staff's work in putting this forward. We look forward to diving more deeply into it, and I imagine this committee will be taking up individual aspects of this plan throughout our work as we move forward. So with that, thank you for joining us, and appreciate you being here, and look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And with that, we are going to move on to our other item. We're going to call up our Office of Legislative Oversight to join us. We have Ms. Dunn, who's going to stay here with us. I want to note that we have Councilmember Balcom, who has joined the committee as well, who unsurprisingly has quite a bit of interest in this particular topic, which we very much appreciate. I just want to make sure I acknowledge to colleagues, as I believe we have shared, today's purpose is to do an overview of this Office of Legislative Oversight report. It is significant. It is in-depth. It has a lot of ramifications, and I think it requires all of us to digest. And so we will be here to ask some questions in terms of follow-up if it is needed, but today is not intended to be a work session. There are no decision points that are before us today. We're going to go through the issues. We're going to go through this very, I think, robust report on some of the recommendations that Office of Legislative Oversight is recommending, and then we're going to have a follow-up for a work session at a later date to really dive in to these challenges. This report, I just want to note, was a long time coming. I had been advocating for this conversation, which ultimately led to this report for several years, dealing with the challenges that we face with what I think is one of the most important land conservation decisions that we have ever made in the county. And one of the reasons why, as we saw during the previous report from the Parks Department, Montgomery County stands better than most jurisdictions anywhere in the country in our ability to prevent sprawl development and to engage in what is now called smart growth, but when this was decided didn't even have a name, but to focus our infrastructure largely in areas of growth, to make sure that our growth is in areas of infrastructure, and to make sure that we are protecting and preserving agriculture and preventing sprawl development from happening. We have two tools largely that have led to the Agricultural Reserve, transfer development rights, the original TDRs, as well as building lot terminations, which were added on after the fact. These are two different programs that have different purposes but serve similar overarching goals. And I just want to make sure that I know that there is a perception, I think, that this report and these conversations are strictly focused only for farmers and for agriculture. And while, yes, the Agricultural Reserve is intended to be for agriculture and for farmers, this is a countywide issue related to how we grow. And this is a countywide issue in terms of the type of smart growth development that we have always focused on in Montgomery County. So I want to note we have representatives from our Office of Agriculture here. I want to thank them for joining us. I really appreciate all of their work and their input on behalf of the office and the executive branch, and also on behalf of the agricultural community, of which they staff many of the entities and work very closely with our stakeholders there. During the work session, they're going to be a key part of that conversation here today if there are any specific questions, but today's focus, as noted, is just going to be on the report itself, on hearing what the recommendations are, on asking any follow-up questions related to the future work that we're going to do so that we're prepared for a work session. And so with that, unless Ms. Dunn has any other comments, I'm going to turn directly to Mr. Tromka and Ms. Garzosa for their comments, their overview of the report, and we will ask questions at the appropriate time. So with that, I'll turn to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Natalia Carrizosa, and I'm here with my colleague Erin Tromka to go over the findings of OLO Report 2023-1 entitled Transferable Development Rights and Building Lot Termination Programs in Montgomery County. Erin and I are going to take about 20 minutes to make a PowerPoint presentation, but before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank the staff from the Office of Agriculture, the Planning Department, and Council staff who provided extensive amounts of time and expertise to assist OLO with this report. So today I'm going to begin by talking about what we were assigned to do, then I'll give some background on the county's Agricultural Reserve, then I'll talk about the Transferable Development Rights or TDR program. Next, Erin will talk about the Building Lot Termination or BLT program and go over our recommendations and discussion questions. So the assignment, what did the council ask OLO to do? The council, and specifically the previous council's Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, asked OLO to prepare a status report on the TDR and BLT programs. This request was in part a response to concerns expressed by the Office of Agriculture that the TDR and BLT programs have been de-emphasized. Before getting into the TDR and BLT programs themselves, I do want to give some quick background on the county's agricultural reserve. In 1980, the county established the agricultural reserve to preserve farmland and open space. At that time, density limits were reduced to allow 1 dwelling unit per 25 acres. Previous limits allowed 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. This is typically referred to as down zoning. At the same time, to compensate landowners for the loss of equity associated with down zoning, the county established the TDR program. But before I get into the details of the TDR program, I also want to share some information about the demographics of farmers. In Montgomery County and throughout the United States, structural racism contributes to large disparities in farmland ownership. The history of chattel slavery and the lack of reparations for it, as well as the absence of similar reparations for Native Americans, land seizures, and racial discrimination by public and private lenders are some of the historical and current drivers. These injustices, along with inequities in education and the labor market, have deeply impacted current racial disparities in wealth and the ownership of land and other assets. An analysis by the county's Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice of 2017 USDA data showed that white producers operated 92% of farms and 98% of farmed acreage in Montgomery County. The TDR and BLT programs both provide compensation to farmers. So what this data from the USDA tells us is that the population of residents eligible to receive compensation through these programs is overwhelmingly white. So now I'm going to talk about the TDR program. The goal of the TDR program is to compensate property owners for the loss of equity resulting from the 1980 downzoning of the agricultural reserve. And the way that the program works is that a property owner can create a single TDR for every 5 acres of land minus 1 TDR for every existing dwelling unit. So if we go back to the downzoning of the agricultural reserve, when density limits went down from 1 unit for every 5 acres to 1 unit for every 25 acres, what this is saying is you can't build on every 5 acres, but you can create a TDR for every 5 acres. Property owners can then receive compensation by selling their TDRs to other parties, usually developers, who can use the TDRs in designated areas outside of the agricultural reserve to achieve increased density there. Another just quick note about the program is that in the early years, the county maintained a development rights fund as a safety net for farmers trying to sell their TDRs and to assure that demand for TDRs existed until the master plan and zoning processes designated sufficient receiving areas for TDRs. So what are these receiving areas? They're called TDR overlay zones, and you can see on the map where they're located. They are essentially receiving areas for TDRs. Owners of property in these zones have the option to develop land with additional density using TDRs. And one key point to note about the TDR overlay zones is that no master plan approved since 2012 has created a new TDR overlay zone. So the overlay zones that you are seeing on this map are the same ones that have existed for over a decade. This slide reviews the process for creating, selling, and using TDRs. First, a property owner creates a TDR, or usually multiple TDRs. In creating the TDRs, the property owner grants to the county a perpetual easement on their property. Theoretically, if the agricultural reserve were to be upzoned in the future, this easement would still restrict development on that land. Next, the property owner must sell the TDRs to another party in order to receive compensation. That other party is usually a developer. Then the developer can use those TDRs to achieve increased density in a TDR overlay zone. There are 5 other county and state programs that acquire agricultural easements in Montgomery County. The county takes title to the quote-unquote buildable TDRs for properties under certain county or state easements. The quote-unquote buildable TDR refers to that single TDR retained for each 25 acres of land in the agricultural reserve that can be used for construction of a housing unit. Current county policy is not to sell these TDRs in order to avoid entering into competition against private landowners. So now onto the data. The Planning Department provided OLO with data that are based on records from the Office of the County Attorney, and these data cover all TDRs that have been created by property owners in the agricultural reserve since 1982. What we see on this chart is that creation of TDRs spiked in the years after the program was created. From 1982 to 2006, an average of 380 TDRs were created per year. Then creation of TDRs dropped sharply and has not since recovered. From 2007 to 2021, property owners created an average of 50 TDRs per year. This table is going to show where we are now with the TDR program, and I'm going to show you a lot of numbers, but I'm presenting this today because this is pretty important. So, planning department staff estimate that in total the agricultural reserve can produce 13,600 TDRs. As of February of last year, farmers had created 10,400 TDRs. That means that there are 3,200 TDRs left to create. And so going back to that 10,400 TDRs that have been created, about 7,900 of them have been used by developers to achieve additional density. And so these TDRs are out of circulation. In addition, a little bit over 1,100 TDRs have been acquired by the county. And as I mentioned earlier, county policy is not to sell these TDRs, so these are also out of circulation. That leaves us with a little bit over 1,300 TDRs that have been created but have not yet been used. And if we go back and add these just a little bit over 1,300 TDRs that have not yet been used with the 3,200 TDRs that could be created in the future, we get over 4,500 TDRs that could be used in the future. So we were just talking about the supply of TDRs. What about the other side of the equation? What is the receiving capacity in the TDR overlay zones? Based on past estimates from the planning department, we estimate that the current maximum receiving capacity in the overlay zones is 966 TDRs, or just under 1,000. If we consider all the TDRs that have been created but not yet been used, then that's the a little bit over 1,300 number from the previous slide, then we find ourselves with a receiving capacity deficit of 400 TDRs. But this doesn't take into account the 3,200 TDRs that could be created in the future. If we consider these plus the ones that have been created but not yet used, a receiving capacity deficit of 3,600 TDRs exists. In other words, the total possible supply is 4.5 times greater than the current receiving capacity. But there is a limitation to this analysis. We don't know how many of these TDRs will actually be created in the future. Creating TDRs is voluntary, and any property owner may choose not to do it. So finally, I want to make a quick note about data quality. Olo didn't audit all of the data used to estimate the number of TDRs by category, but we reviewed land records for nearly 700 TDRs created since 2010. We found multiple discrepancies in the data provided by county agencies, and therefore we find that the existing system for tracking TDRs requires review and improvement to ensure accuracy. And now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you, Natalia. So now we're going to discuss the BLT, Building Lot Termination Program. The county created the program in 2008 as a tool to prevent fragmentation of the agricultural reserve. The program offers compensation to property owners in exchange for foregoing development of buildable TDRs. That is the 5th TDR in every 25 acres that is eligible for construction of the house. A property owner may create one BLT for each 25 acres of land that can be served by a septic system. Oops, and I went too far. And property owners who elect to create a BLT can then sell it to a developer who can use it to attain density in a development outside of the agricultural reserve. So, a developer may use BLTs to increase density on properties in only certain zones as specified in the zoning ordinance. The ordinance requires the purchase of BLTs or an equivalent payment to the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund for optional method developments in the commercial, residential, and life sciences center zones, and the zoning ordinance permits discretionary use of BLTs to increase density for optional method development in the commercial, residential, town, and employment office zones. As authorized in the county code, the county purchased BLTs from landowners during the early years of the program. County regulations require that the executive annually issue an executive order establishing the amount the county pays for a BLT. The most recent executive order dates back to 2013 and established the base price at about $222,000. As we'll describe in a few minutes, the county last purchased a BLT back in 2015. So we'll review some BLT data. First, not on the slide, but on the supply side, the Office of Agriculture estimates the agricultural reserve could produce about 1,000 BLTs, though a more precise calculation is not really possible without septic testing all the potentially eligible properties. But now, what about the demand side? How much BLT demand has there been to date? Well, as of February of last year, the county had purchased 30 BLTs, while the private sector buyers had purchased 16 BLTs and used them to achieve bonus density. 15 BLTs had been created but not yet used. This graph shows the number of BLTs created by year as of February of last year and their present disposition status. There's a lot of data here, but I'll just point out a few things. You'll see that no BLTs were created since 2018. In contrast, between 2011 and 2018, between 4 and 9 BLTs were created per year. Of note, only 6 previously created BLTs have been sold and used in the past 4 years. The graph also shows that public purchase of BLTs, shown in green, ended in 2016. It's important to note that landowners cannot sell a fraction of a BLT, yet fractional BLTs do exist in the form of what is called a partial BLT. A partial BLT is a developer contribution to the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund to attain additional density, and the developer will pay for a partial BLT when the density bonus achieved is calculated to be less than one whole BLT. Since 2016, the Planning Board has approved 23 different projects with partial BLTs, and those BLTs and those projects sum to a total of 10.3 whole BLTs. Just for comparison, during that same period, developers bought only 7 whole BLTs. So you'll see in recent years the partial BLT activity has been much greater than the whole BLT activity. As previously noted, the price the county pays for a whole BLT is established by executive order, but that same executive order is also the basis for determining the amount paid by developers for partial BLTs. And as noted, that value of a BLT was last established in 2013 and has not been reassessed or adjusted for inflation. Quick note about the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund. Developers who make payments for BLTs, those dollars go into the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund, which is a revolving fund intended to support county purchase of agricultural easements, including BLTs. The fund received an initial one-time infusion of $5 million in 2009. However, that seed money has not been replicated since, and all other funding sources generally produce relatively small amounts of revenue. The county code requires that the county maintain a separate BLT account within the ALPF. All the partial payments for partial BLTs go into that account, and the county code further stipulates that the dollars in that BLT account may only be spent on purchase of BLT easements. However, despite about $3 million being added to the BLT account from partial BLT payments, to date the county has not used any funds in the BLT account for the purchase of BLTs. In reviewing the use of the BLT account resources, OLL found that revenues from partial BLT contributions have been offset by administrative, salary, and other program costs that have been charged against the BLT account. We will conclude with a summary of our 5 recommendations and 3 discussion questions. Lots of things to recommend and discuss. First, more than 4 decades after its inception, the TDR activity has slowed considerably. Many landowners have not yet created TDRs. Many TDRs that have been created have yet to be sold. No TDR receiving capacity has been established in more than a decade. These circumstances prompt us to recommend that the Council consider the future time span of this program with the goal of establishing equilibrium between the final supply of TDRs and receiving area demand. As Natalia demonstrated earlier, we are far from equilibrium today. We suggest that the county establish a sunset date for landowners to create TDRs. The purpose of this sunset is to determine the actual supply of TDRs that will require a receiving capacity. Importantly, the sunset that we're recommending is for the creation of new TDRs, but would not sunset the sale or use of TDRs. We suggest consulting with the Planning Board, the Office of Agriculture, and landowners to determine the appropriate sunset date. Also, the council should direct the planning board to increase demand for TDRs. These recommendations go hand in hand. An increase in TDR demand may be achieved by designating new TDR overlay zones or by amending the zoning ordinance to otherwise incentivize the purchase of TDRs. Second, as noted earlier, no BLTs have been created during the last 4 years, and the majority of BLTs created in the prior 3 years have not been used. These trends suggest that the current demand for BLTs is insufficient to accommodate the existing supply. We recommend that the council direct the planning board to identify strategies to increase the supply of BLTs. Third, the Fed committee of the previous council requested their support after considering a zoning text amendment in which provisions to promote affordable housing could have conflicted with the use of TDRs. We suggest that the council and the planning board look for approaches to balancing agricultural preservation and affordable housing objectives with racial equity and social justice as a key consideration. And to this end, we note that TDR and BLT programs do increase the overall supply of housing and thus may indirectly reduce housing costs. Fourth, in preparing this report, OLO found discrepancies in various data sources as well as an absence of a shared methodology for tracking TDR and BLT data. We recommend the planning board work with the Office of Agriculture to improve tracking of TDR and BLT supply and to establish a process for estimating receiving capacity for TDRs. And fifth, as the county has not purchased any BLTs in recent years, the executive has not updated the base price of a BLT since 2013. However, the executive order is also the basis for calculating developer contributions for partial BLTs. As the base value of a BLT has not been reassessed nor adjusted for inflation, OLO is concerned that the county may be leaving dollars on the table that could otherwise support agricultural preservation. So we recommend the council ask the executive to issue an updated executive order. And finally, we pose 3 questions regarding the long-term direction of the TDR and BLT program. First, should the county intervene in the TDR and BLT market? If so, under what conditions? More specifically, under what circumstances should the county consider selling its supply of TDRs? And under what circumstances should the county resume the practice of purchasing BLTs? Second, the purpose of the Agricultural Land Preservation Fund is to purchase agricultural easements. However, in recent years, the county has charged administrative expenditures such as salary and operating expenses to the fund. As part of the CIP process, the Executive and Council should consider whether to use general fund resources for these administrative costs so as to preserve funding for the acquisition of easements, including BLT easements. And third, developers earn optional method of density bonuses by providing public benefits, including the purchase of whole or partial BLTs. The zoning ordinance includes 7 categories of public benefits with dozens of subcategories. This menu of public benefits creates an element of competition among the different elements. We suggest that the Council and Planning Board reevaluate the menu of public benefits and the associated assignment of points every few years to verify that the system aligns with current county priorities. And in fact, the Planning Department has informed us that they are working on just such an evaluation and expect to present the findings to the Council by the fall of 2024. So that concludes our presentation. It's a quick overview of the report, and we're ready to answer any questions or facilitate the discussion however we can.
Well, let me first just say thank you for the report. It is really thoughtful and detailed, and it dives into really complicated issues that I think we all can recognize. This is not a simple issue. There are a lot of different layers to it. It has implications on a lot of different aspects of planning and zoning, our environmental stewardship, our broader priorities of where and how to build and the type of growth that we want in Montgomery County, and the fact that the agricultural reserve, as we have talked about before, needs to be both environmentally sustainable and economically sustainable for it to be able to continue, and this is at the heart of it. I want to reiterate to colleagues that we intend to have a work session where we're going to have the Office of Agriculture and Planning at the table to talk through some of these issues. I will say in a number of conversations that I have had since this report was made public, I think there are a number of areas where there is broad consensus on the problem, where we have an opportunity to work on a solution, though none is before us yet today. There's some more work that needs to be done, and I think there are a number of areas where there might be differences of opinion that we need to work through as a council and decide policy priorities, some of which are near term and some of which are longer term and ongoing questions as as OLO has provided for us here. I do think that there is an opportunity to clean up some of the things that have been done in the past. I will note the prior Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee took a very specific look at some of the other areas in which the operating costs of the Office of Agriculture was being used out of funds that were intended for other purposes in order to address some immediate, urgent fiscal dynamics largely related to the Great Recession. And unfortunately, we got comfortable with those decisions and didn't make appropriate changes when we were no longer in triage crisis mode. I think this is another example of it, an opportunity for us to look at that and to support the Office of Agriculture, which, as we've talked about before, punches above its weight and does a tremendous job, but shouldn't be asked both to do more than it's capable of doing with the resources it receives, but also should not be expected to be paying operating costs and other expenses out of the tools that we're supposed to be providing them to do the work that we're asking them to do. And that includes land preservation funds, which has largely been, unfortunately, what has happened. There were moments where that was an appropriate response in a fiscal crisis, but I don't think as an ongoing policy is appropriate. And I know that the prior committee was keen on making those changes and advocating with the executive on making those changes. And I know that that's something that we will take up as we move forward, but it's a broader issue to just this program that I wanted to note that we have discussed previously at the council. And then the last thing I'll say in the conversations with planning, there has been an ongoing discussion on public benefit points. More broadly than just this particular issue, but that this particular issue is directly related to. And we will have an opportunity as part of this discussion, but also in a separate but related discussion on the public benefits points. And I have personally brought this up a lot and discussed this a lot in public settings, and this has largely been the response, that this deep dive into the public benefits points and some of the challenges of whether or not it is accomplishing what we have hoped it had accomplished, and should we make changes and tweaks to that process. This is a good example of the opportunity to reassess and to make sure that it is. So with that, let me turn it over to colleagues first. I'll first check to see if committee members have any questions or comments that they'd like to make, and then I will turn it to Councilmember Balcom, who represents a large swath of the Agricultural Reserve, which obviously is at the center of much of these conversations.
I would just...
Ms. Finnegan-Gonzalez.
I would just say one thing. Being on the planning board, I'm a witness on how this program is a big animal that needs to be reassessed. And I love the recommendations that Olo made, and I look forward to the input from the Planning Department and the Office of Agriculture to ensure that we are evolving on this. That's all.
Okay. The fine council member from District 2.
Thank you. Thank you. Understanding that this isn't a work session, just a couple of the issues that have already been made. The BLT account or the ALPF account, I think that's something that I would like a lot more information on in terms of the history of the money going in, money going out, and we're getting ready to look at budget right now, and so I think that's a change that we need to look at for the general fund. And then also, just a question, and you don't have to answer it now, we can answer it later, is the estimation of the potential BLTs. I know that you can't identify specifically how many are available, but could we extrapolate based on the septic system in the area and kind of have a guess of how many BLTs might be out there?
So I think it's quite difficult, and one of the factors is that
when a property owner creates a BLT, they are foregoing the right to build on their property that they currently have. And so in addition to it being difficult to kind of assess on a large scale which land would be eligible for the program, it's also very difficult to predict who would actually want to participate in it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And then I think I asked this before, and I can't remember the answer. Is there any hurdle for the creation of TDRs from the landowner, or is that just simply that it hasn't that it hasn't been done?
Good afternoon. What I would say is it's not a hurdle, but I think one thing that wasn't mentioned is that when you create even your first TDR, and it does put an easement across your property by the creation of just that first TDR to take advantage of your compensation. That easement on your property comes with it a list of land uses you can no longer do that are currently allowed in the agricultural reserve. So I just want to, it's not simply that you need to file the right paperwork and get a serialized TDR number for that TDR you're creating. Creating the first one puts an easement over your property, and there is this list of uses, and it's in the zoning code that they're just no longer available to that landowner.
Okay,
So
thank
that's
you.
a slight hurdle.
Thanks. Just the last point. Of course, I love the Ag Reserve. It's my backyard, and the future of the Ag Reserve really rests with the economic success of the farming community, and so we have to get this right. And then I also think from a more exercise in what happens in the future, once this TDR program is done, say all the TDRs have been resolved, sold, purchased and sold, we really need to think about the next 40 years and what happens for the next generation of landowners. And I think that's a much bigger question, but I think that that's an important question of how are we going to preserve this land into the future.
Yeah, I would concur, Council Member. In many ways, the TDR program is associated with the downzoning that happened more than 4 decades ago. So you're absolutely correct. In many ways, it's a retrospective program. And what you're suggesting is the next step needs to be more prospectively looking. We would agree with you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I think your point about the economic viability, what I was talking about earlier, and couldn't agree with you more, that in order for the agricultural reserve to be environmentally sustainable, it has to be economically sustainable. And that's part of this conversation, is how do we ensure that agriculture is economically sustainable moving forward, particularly when we have taken away a tool that is used to finance farming operations. And I think that's an important part of this. One of the tools is to borrow against the value of your land. But we have taken away the value of the land by saying that it can't be developed, by downzoning it in 1980. And in exchange for that, we created essentially a cap and trade system that creates a marketplace that we established out of thin air, using the tools that we have at our disposal through zoning. And we did it for very good reason, and we did it because it pursued the overarching interest that we had of not only agricultural land preservation and conservation, but in smart growth development and ensuring that we had density near infrastructure and that we created the type of communities that we wanted in the most environmentally sustainable and cost-effective ways that we could. Not a new idea, but something that really created the type of land use pattern that we have built the entire county on for the last 60 plus years. That deal is no longer functioning in the way that we want it to. And so the question is, how do we make changes to this deal in this marketplace that we have created to ensure that it's functioning, to ensure that it's fair, and to ensure that it protects the public interest that we establish it for as a county, as a community, many years ago. I think that's where I hope that we will take this up in earnest and look forward to us taking it up. Like I said, I think there is in many ways, agreement that it's not functioning in the way that it was intended. I think there is agreement to a number of the challenges. The BLT program and the TDR program are not the same. We need to address them in different ways because they are different programs with different challenges, but they both speak to the same broader public interest goals for a system that we're trying to create that, or to refine, I should say, that pursues these public interest goals. So we will be scheduling a work session. We will have the Office of Agriculture and Planning at the table. I'm sure that there will be conversations leading up to that meeting, as there have been up to this point. I especially want to look at the fact that a sunset is being proposed and what that would look like with TDRs in particular, but also making it so that if we create a sunset, as is recommended, we have to have a system that works, that is functioning. And we need to make sure that those two things are being done hand in glove, because if we sunset a mechanism that's part of a system that we haven't yet fixed, then we haven't really solved the problem. Then within this, there are a number of other areas of the way in which we do this work, looking at the BLT program. I want to make sure that we're not solving problems for the sake of solving problems, that we really address what is really the issue here. I think there are examples within the report that are important points that we need to look at, but might not be the highest priority in terms of actually fixing the system, and really taking a look at that. And then I do think we can control what we can control as a county government, and there's certain aspects of this in terms of the type of funds that we have set up, the purposes of those funds, whether we're using them for the purposes that we've stated, and whether we should make changes to that related certainly to the operating budget, but also just more broadly related to the council and the executive, taking on our end of this bargain, which we need to really take a deep dive into. If colleagues have any other questions or comments, any other comments from Office of Legislative Oversight or from council staff? Okay, like I said, we'll be taking this up again. I want to appreciate and thank the Office of Agriculture, thank the Planning Department, both of whom are here represented in the room, for all of the work with Office of Legislative Oversight on this report. It's going to take a partnership for us to figure this out and for us to move forward with a system that functions in the way that it was intended when it was created, and that is set up, as Councilmember Balcom noted, not just for the 43 years ago, but for the next 43 years, because we need to have a system that sustains and continues to pursue our broader public priorities of protecting and preserving the agricultural reserve and ensuring that we have the type of development, smart growth that we want that achieves our environmental priorities. So with that, we will adjourn for today, and we will come back for a work session to work through these issues one by one. Thanks, everybody.